All right. So waiting for it to load onto YouTube. And when I see we're live, we'll dive in. Looks like it's working. All right. Perfect. Okay, give me 1 second here. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind Body and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matthew Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming extreme censorship. So if you want to support this show, please share episodes far and wide, leave a review, but most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. After walking away from a career in the performing arts to focus on guiding individuals into a surprising new approach to personal transformation, today's guest has spent 25 years as a bioenergetics therapist, healer, speaker, and author. He has nurtured thousands into meaningful empowerment through his school of self mastery and inspired millions to come together for worldwide events that he has led from sacred sites around the globe. Welcome to the show, Ron Baker.
Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
I'm super excited to do this show. I looked at your bio and all the stuff you've done. The sacred sites is exciting. Profound awakening is exciting. Your story is exciting. So we can dive all over the place. But I'd love for you to share just a little bit about your background. How did you go into the performing arts and being on Broadway, and then writing a book and going and doing these ceremonies and these healing experiences at sacred sites, which brings up all other conversation and mystery. So just give us a little background
Yeah,
and we'll start diving in.
yeah, that's like about 10 questions. I have been very fortunate to get a broad spectrum of experiences in my life. And since I was a little kid, I have been just a major adventurer, wanting to understand how everything works, feeling like there were deeper answers, more complete truths about life than the people around me knew how to provide. So I basically went on a journey, a search for those wiser answers, and got to travel all over the world because of performing, and sought out teachers and put together pieces. And so the background is I grew up in North Carolina, and I was involved in as many things as I could. And the performing arts kept coming back, kept pulling me. I thought I was going to become a doctor. And basically, synchronicity kept bringing me back to the performing arts. And I was like, you know what? I've always listened to that green light, that go, the intuitive yes inside me. And so I basically ended up letting go of becoming a doctor and followed this path of performing. And then it just blossomed. And I was one of the lucky ones. I got to do over 60 leading roles in opera and in Broadway shows all over. And it gave me a chance to have a world education about cultures and people and how we're so much more alike, even though we have unique approaches. And all these things where I got to pull pieces of wisdom from so many different wise beings on the planet just kept inspiring this search. And then as I was going, when I was in my early 20s, I discovered I had this capacity to feel other people and could feel the energy in their bodies, where it was moving, where it was blocked. It took a while to figure it out, but in the grand scheme of it, I thought, you know what? I'm going to figure out, since I can feel this, if I can figure out how to clear those blockages, how to move that energy and create health in other people. And so I got to pull back in that interest of being a doctor, but doing it more as an energy practitioner and a nurturer. And then after the performing career went to a certain point, I was like, you know what? People are way too important to me. And I want to take everything that I've learned and bring it directly to the people. And so basically decided to study as a bioenergetics therapist and created my own approach to all of this personal transformation. And that's a broad overview of the journey.
I love that. It seems like the short story, and you and it's amazing. You have a new book coming out. What's the title? I know the Bright Lights, Big Empty, a journey of profound awakening. So, what's with the big empty part of it? That to me was a little different.
Yeah, well, when I was a little kid, I had my set of challenges just like everybody does. I actually end up calling that the soul curriculum of our lives. It gets set up in childhood. And one of my main ones was having a dad who literally never said a single thing to me, not one conversation that I can remember. And so it left me with a whole lot of self doubt and insecurity. I didn't know if I had any value at all. And so I had this spiritual opening and this desire to understand life, but I didn't trust me. So when the talents began to appear, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to actually get attention, have opportunity, be seen. And so putting all those pieces together in like a wounded child, I was like, I'm going to go out in the world and prove my worth. I'm going to prove to my dad that I have worth and value. And so I sought the bright lights. I had the opportunities. I literally, in addition to performing all of that, I got to sing with celebrities and dine with royalty and even shared the stage with two Supreme Court justices. And I was like, uh oh, this is not taking away my wounded emptiness on the inside. And so the initial title is all about seeking that validation, seeking that glamour, but on the inside, feeling big empty. So that's where it initially starts. And then, of course, the subtitle is A Journey of Profound Awakening, and putting the pieces together and learning how to build a sense of self and learning how to help others, thousands of others around the world, do that is where the journey takes us in the book.
Wow, well, that's terrible to hear. I started to hear that, and I know people on this podcast and around the world have maybe heard us saying something like that, right? You get rich and famous, and then that's not the answer, or whatever that case is. Now, I know people will be thinking of, yeah, right. Like I need to get this, I need to achieve this. If I had it, it would be so much easier. And I've spoken to many people who've had that outer success and it didn't fill the inner void. So then we go into the how, like what are we doing? Was it I'm curious, is it something that wasn't heart and soul aligned, and that's why it's like you were trying to cover like a pain that you had? It wasn't, because it seems like it was a little bit aligned for you. And I feel like
Oh,
often people, it's just like they're going into just money or just fame because they're covering this pain. But for you, it seemed a little bit more aligned than for most.
well, I like to say we have a combination of gifts and challenges. And by gifts, I don't just mean talents. I mean, we have interests and we have priorities and we have certain qualities of self that are just natural to our soul. And so we have those gifts and they inspire us. And then we have the wounded challenges, which also inspire us. So I definitely loved expressing myself as an actor and singer. I loved the journey of that. And so it was aligned with something that mattered to me, but it did not take away the wound. So it wasn't that performing is empty and performing or achieving or gaining riches is bad and wrong or doesn't have the potential to be fulfilling as a piece of the puzzle. The problem is we've lived in a world where nobody talks about self and how to build a sense of self and how to build self-value and all of that. I literally went to 20 years of school. I got 3 degrees after high school. Not one course talked about self. And so it was like we get taught these skills and we get handed this idealism of if you just go and you make money and you get a job and you create a relationship and you have children and you have, well, that's awesome in the outer. But if the inner is disconnected. And on the inside, in my case, I was still frozen like the wounded child whose dad never spoke to him, and was still stuck in that perception of how will I know when I've proved myself. At the bottom line, what I figured out is it's how we feel about ourselves that fills that inner. So even if I'd had the mom and dad who were totally conscious and handed me all of the levels of nurturing that I needed and the consistency of that support and encouragement, I still would have had to learn how to feel that way about myself. So, mommy and daddy are not the source and they're not the solution. They're just a starting place that sets up the challenges and gifts. And so, I basically, finding all these teachers, had a common encouragement. You need to learn to connect to your inner self as a starting place. And I was like, well, that's about the last place I want to look because that's where I'm holding and hiding all my fear and shame. And so basically, just the journey of finally listening to all these wise people and combining it with my ability to feel my own blocks and gradually put together the pieces from all different kinds of education to create a place where I truly value the man that I have become. Because as adults, we can decide, who do I want to be? Who do I choose to be? What qualities am I going to practice? So it's a combination of learning that we have a choice and that our initial child perspective was just the soul set up for the lifetime. It doesn't equal that's the truth. It just equals this is what you are here to face, to nurture, to learn how to resolve. And as you move into a deeper adult truth, then it can give you a contrast so you can go back in and reparent that wounded child on the inside that was you. And you can nurture and you can acknowledge and you can encourage and support the various stages and experiences that we went through as children. And this is what I show people how to do in this book. I go back and reparent and then show the process of how I went from self-doubt to self-confidence and self-value and love the man that I have chosen to be. So that's a bunch of disparate pieces of the journey.
That's beautiful and very well said. You brought up a lot of important topics there. One of the things that I've noticed in working with a lot of people and listening to a lot of people is that whatever that childhood wound is, and it might be obvious, right? You might have gone through a trauma or something like your father wasn't there or whatever the case is, it doesn't really go away unless we learn how to transmute it and make peace with it and move forward. It'll stay there in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and 60s, and it'll affect your self-worth. It'll affect your decision making. It'll affect your relationships. And we're not really taught on how to, understand those things. And one hypothesis I've put forward is that I feel like our inner child, like that inner voice that we have where we're talking to ourselves, or we beat each other, like we beat ourselves up in our mind. And whenever I do a poll, if I'm speaking or training or something, I'll say how many people are really hard on themselves in between their ears, in their own mind. And most people, 90%, are very hard on themselves. And I
Yeah.
imagine it as like my adult self beating up my 7-year-old self, the one that's kind of, gone from like a baby that needs to be taken care of to start to have a little bit of independence and to understand the world and everything around me and the individual. So I think that that's so important to deal with. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your journey and strategy for that, because I love when you said it's the journey of loving yourself. No matter what parents you have, there's also stories with the most perfect parents on paper, and they did everything and they end up going down this really crazy path because that's their contract or karma or decision or whatever the case is to overcome that to get to the next step. And so I'm curious if you can talk about that. And is that why in your book, the parts you have are the call, child, adult, and soul? Is that kind of how that process unfolds?
So when I teach people, and I've had the opportunity to teach thousands of people from different countries and cultures and whatever, I like to present a very clear map, a very clear trajectory for people to understand what building self equals, what a soul journey equals, so that you can evaluate where you are. It's like going in to take a course in school, and if nobody explains what you're going to be covering and what the goal is and how you can measure reaching each level of success and integration, then you're just lost. And so most people go through life quite disconnected from self, feeling rather lost and working really hard and then becoming disillusioned and not having a lot of will. What's the point? Why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard? So I like to give a clear map. So the way I divide self is through three stages of child, adult, soul. But that implies a lot more than just the ages of 0 to 18 as child. No, for me, this is the core of self, the innocent self, where the soul sets up a lifetime with gifts and challenges, and the initial layers of self are introduced, and we have 9 levels of nurturing that need to be introduced that encourage us to trust our value, to trust experience, to trust connecting, giving, receiving, all of those things. Well, I've been teaching this for 25 years. I've not met one person who was given all the levels of nurturing and consistency into how to build self. And so the child becomes sort of like the hard drive of the computer, where the curriculum of the lifetime is set up. Then we move into adult bodies, but that doesn't mean we move into adult consciousness. Sure, we can do things we couldn't do. We have physical capacities that we didn't have, but it doesn't mean that our emotional and depth of consciousness just automatically moves to this much wiser place. Usually the hard drive of the computer, the child, ends up being lots of decisions. I have to do this. I can't do that. These are the limits. This is what I deserve. I have to stay within this comfort zone. I have to prove myself. I have to play certain roles. So all of that programming in the child is what I imply by child. And then when we move into adulthood, how does it work? In order to understand the map, we have to understand more fully how life dances with us. In order to support us, we then attract in our adult lives similar archetypes, similar situations to what we had set up in childhood. So if we had an unavailable parent, didn't know how to acknowledge us, value us, see us, invest in us, then I have tons of clients who say, why am I always attracting the unavailable person that I'm dating? Why am I attracted? It's the same paradigm of the child, but you have an adult who can evaluate it, who has choices. And this begins to make us aware of, wait a minute, I need more education. I need more tools. I need to show up and shift this. And so that's where I went on my journey, and that's what I help people to do, so that the adult can learn to see things from a deeper truth. So lots of people have heard a Bible verse that says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Well, what the heck does that mean? What truth? Where truth? And so what I like to say is there were just some words left out of this. You shall discover adult truths that shall set your wounded child free. So I'll use my dad as an example. When I was around 30, I was like, you know what? My adult recognizes half of this relationship is up to me. I can stay frozen as the child who goes, my dad never and he and blame and or I can go, wait a minute, I'm 30. I'm half responsible for this relationship. So I phoned my dad and I said, "You're about to come see me perform at Lincoln Center. When you're here, could we sit down and have a one on one? First one of my lifetime. Could we have a one on one and share? I don't know anything about you. I would love to know more." And he surprised me and he said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to." And so when we did, I started hearing all kinds of adult truths that I hadn't known how to consider as a child. As an example, he says, "My dad died when I was a little kid, and I had 9 siblings, and we had a farm, and I had no modeling about what a family was. It was all about just the farm, the farm, the farm." He said, "Actually, there were 2 years where I had to miss so much school in order to get the crops in that I had to repeat those 2 years of school." And I was blown away. And he said, "But the gift in that was by the time I was in high school, I was older than the other kids, and therefore I was bigger and stronger. And this allowed me to excel in athletics, and that gave me scholarships to go to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college." And two of the most poignant things that he said to me was, "I don't know. I might have been a terrible father." And I'm thinking, oh my God, first of all, how can he be that clueless? Second of all, I had compassion. I was like, he really is that innocent. It really was. And then he says to me, "This is the first time anyone has ever asked me." Now, my dad is extremely successful in the business world. He has done so many achievements in his life. He got his master's. He's very intelligent mentally. But this emotional thing and this intimate connection thing was totally surprising to him. And he was like, "This is the first time anyone has ever asked me to share all these things about myself." And he talked for almost 3 hours. And I was like, he was in self doubt, frozen in his child. It wasn't about me. He wasn't making a statement about my unworthiness of his time, energy, attention. He literally had no idea and was scared to death of vulnerability. So he put all of his effort into that outer achievement that we spoke about. And he was frozen at whatever age he was at that point, in his 50s for sure. And this is the first time he's had a conversation like this. So the adult truths helped my wounded child to see it differently. And so I, at that point, had learned all kinds of different ways about identifying the kinds of nurturing that was missing in my early life. And I had begun providing that for my clients. And they were all responding so beautifully. So I was able to then go back with my child and help him see the deeper truths that we had personalized in the limbic brain early on, for him to see that it was not indeed about him at all, that this was the setup. Now, the perfection of that is that my challenge of not being nurtured by my father put so much focus on the importance of it that I went on this journey to find out what was missing, how to nurture myself, that it even led me to what I consider my most meaningful purpose, getting to be a paternal figure in thousands of lives. If my dad had given me mediocre level of nurturing, I might just have settled and not really put any focus and attention on it. So to me, that's the sole perfection of this whole journey. And so that's just one of the challenges that I talk about in the book. And it's helping people see by looking at my journey and the process that has allowed such a beautiful transformation to be applied to them, just placing their challenges into the equation and learning how to nurture, reparent, and free themselves with deeper truths.
Wow. Well, that is an incredibly powerful story. And I like how you
Thank you.
started it with saying, that this relationship is half of my responsibility, and taking accountability for that to reach out. And, often when we have an experience with somebody that's not positive, a parent, a friend, or whatever the case is, we take it personally, we make up a story, right? That may or
Yeah.
may not be true. And so when
Yeah.
you seek understanding and you treat it with compassion, then you might discover something that you would have never discovered by staying in that story that you've created for yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and even if you reach out and it doesn't go the way that you thought, that's okay. You still did that. You did, what you were able to do, and you kind of keep that door open for that other person to stay, you know, the adult, I guess, in the situation. Like my daughter is only 2, and she'll do things and I'll act, in a certain way. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm the adult here, although she's, being a little bum, it's like I gotta be the
Yeah.
adult because she doesn't understand. But we have that in relationships and how we communicate with people. So I think that that's a really powerful and beautiful story. And then to remind people, it's not about you, right? The other person has their own world going on, you know what I mean? And that meaning you attach to that experience may not be what you think it is. So that's incredibly
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Well, the limbic brain is an egocentric, narcissistic brain. And that is really important when we're a child because this is what says there's a me. I exist. I'm an individual. And so we take in everything that's happening and we personalize it, even though it's not about us. That's the primitive way of setting up these core challenges that we have. And we personalize it. Then we find ourselves in adulthood when somebody's having a bad day, they're just negotiating some feelings that we don't even know about. And we're like, oh, they don't like me. We project. Why would we do that? Because I'm not liking me in that moment. I'm not valuing me. And so I'm looking out for the mommy daddy replacement to validate me. And when somebody's in a bad mood, I already decided way back when these are the signs that mommy daddy don't love who I am exactly authentically as I am. So I better bury this part of myself. And we get all caught up in the challenge and setup. And so then we bring that right back up from the core or from that hard drive of the child part of self, and we project it just like what you said. And so it's an interesting thing to learn how to recognize adult truth and then how to practice staying in the adult, which takes time. We have a lot of practice being in the habitual child. And so it's a beautiful thing to build it by percentages and allow the learning curve and get better and better and better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a learning curve whenever you're switching old patterns, and the more ingrained they are, the longer it's going to take. And so, if you're habitually in anxiety or depression or frustration, if you learn how to shorten that duration, maybe you started at most a day, 80% of your day you're frustrated and angry. Well, as you learn, throughout the day to kind of stop that emotion, come back to a breath or something like that, and set an intention, then you're starting to just shorten that neural circuit. And I kind of like to say, like, in your neurology, it creates this mental map of the world. And when something's hardwired, it's like a slide. So when you start
Yep.
nipping that neurology a little bit, it creates other options, because any kind of option
Yeah.
is going to find you back to that same, response of anxiety, frustration, anger, whatever those emotions are. And I love how
Yeah.
you're speaking about practical applications in these maps. And that's my favorite thing when I'm looking at personal development and strategies. Is like, I need a process, you know what I mean? I need something to do and try. And so you've spoken about the 9 levels of nurturing, and I'm
Hmm.
curious if we start there and just, your map, so to speak, on like having self-worth, and then taking that self-worth into your own purpose or your soul's mission or your own alignment. Because I feel like, in my experience, it's a balance of who you authentically are mixed with that response from the world. Like it's going to be pulling you in a certain direction. And when you're able to kind of read the tea leaves of the world with your inner knowing, that's how things line up, because it might be a little bit different than you thought, but it's in the direction of your own authenticity and what excites you and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So these are obviously big subjects, and there are so many layers to look forward to when someone decides to explore, for instance, this kind of approach that I teach. It just keeps getting better and better. And when I introduce the map of what is possible to begin with, people often go, well, that sounds amazing, but it sounds like too good to be true. And I go, let's talk in 3 to 6 months and remind you of this conversation. And you'll see that you've made distinct forward steps. And I'll talk about some of the ways how in a second. But I go, you need to give anything in transformation some time, but you need to be proactive and be introducing new things in that time. And then all of a sudden, you're getting used to a new approach and a new experience. The word experience is almost as foreign as the word self for most people. We talk about change your mind and you'll change your reality. And I'm like, okay, that's a piece of the puzzle, but believe me, that is not going to change your depth of fulfillment. It'll change your focus. You might be able to shift some behaviors, but the bottom line is we're not fulfilled by behaviors. We're fulfilled experientially. And so if we don't have a way to get in touch with self and a way to get in touch with our own experience, well, most people live up in their heads. Why is that? In childhood, when we have all these experiences that taught us what is possible, what's not possible, according to the wounded family paradigm, we're like, I don't want to deal with any of that. I don't want to feel fear and shame. Like I said, it was the last place I wanted to look was inside. So what we do is we leave the lower torso and we go into the head, trying to get as far away as we can. And then we're trying to figure it all out. And we're observing life and we're not connected to self. Well, if I'm not in my body and I'm not moving energy in my body, I'm not actually experiencing my own life moment to moment to moment. So I teach people how to get reconnected with self, how to move energy, how to feel safe with this experiential. And when I model, like we needed mommy and daddy to do, all 9 levels of nurturing, the first is safety, not only physical safety, but emotional safety. And so at the end of one session, I'll go, so I'm going to name the 9 nurturing needs, and you tell me in this hour, have you felt, and I start with safe. And they're like, oh yeah. And I go through all 9 and they're like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, if in just meeting me 1 hour ago, you can now recognize you've actually experienced all 9 levels of nurturing. Imagine us doing this consistently and you feeling acknowledged, accepted, compassion, guidance, support, encouragement, connection, and affection. If you experience this, your adult is getting the alternative to the wounded child. And then I'm going to teach you how to provide those 9 nurturing experiences for yourself. So you're the source, you're the authority in your own life. I wouldn't want you to just go, oh, well, it's really cool. Ron can provide that. So now I'm going to be dependent on Ron to be my new parental figure. That wouldn't be freedom. That wouldn't be true empowerment. But I model that it's possible and then teach people how to treat themselves in this way. And that builds the actual experience that allows us to trust value of self. We reinforce it, and we then start to value other people and inspire relationships that are not just a reiteration of the child archetypes, but that we grow with other people and we start creating this much more fulfilling environment, community, soul chosen family of people where we can deepen and truly know value. If you look at all the challenges in the world today, it really boils down to the simplicity of people don't know how to value themselves. They don't know how to trust that their needs matter. They don't trust that they are an equal with everyone else in one way or another. And so we then start to go for more stuff and more money and the bigger thing. And no, I've got to have more land. And no, I have. We're like wounded children in a desperate compensation for what was missing. But when we learn how to trust that all of these levels of nurturing can be our consistent experience, and we learn that we can give it to ourselves, and then we can inspire relationships of giving and receiving mutual value, then we don't need all that overcompensated stuff, and we can get on with focusing on the solutions that we are desperately in need of in the world. So those are a few more thoughts.
Yeah, I love all that. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of martial arts, because if you go to a good quality martial arts gym, they teach you a lot of that stuff. It's a lot about honor, respect, and this, these characters on the wall, and you look at the old samurai and the Bushido code and things like that. My background in martial arts is kind of just, I always see it through that lens, and I always knew that there was value in sport for young children because you have your parents at home, but then you have another influence, whether it's hockey or football or whatever. You have another figure out there teaching you about, how to be a good man, how to be a good person, how to be a good woman, or whatever the case is for your own experience. And you get these intangible things, and if we can learn to give it to ourselves, like you said, that's the most important thing. And so I'm curious if you can kind of share one of your best tools for that, because I loved your list there. That's super important. And I remember one podcast I did with someone, and he like um did peak performance or something for the Pentagon, and he kind of knew what he's talking about, but he didn't have like a lot of depths of tools. But I remember
Mm-hmm.
learning this one tool a long time ago from another friend, and this was the only tool that he used in his leadership career that kind of skyrocketed him, it seemed, from the stories he was telling. And it was to listen to somebody completely, even if they're upset with you or whatever. So he told the story about how he got hired to do some consulting, and then the CEO came in and kind of ripped him a new one. And then all he did was repeat back to him everything that he heard. So now he's fully heard, and then says, is there anything else? And if you're in a relationship and you have a partner, just do that, because very often we're never fully heard. So we're not fully acknowledged. We're not fully appreciated. And, we'll hold that in, or whatever we're going to do. So just that one can be incredibly transformative. And so if you're in a community where you're giving that to yourself, you're giving that to your family, to your loved ones, and to your friends, they know how to give it to their family, loved ones, and friends, and their businesses and their employees, or whatever the case is. What it does is it elevates your opportunity for success, because you're way out of survival mode and safety mode into expansion, into opportunity, into solutions. And it's a very beautiful, supportive environment. And just like in martial arts, where I'm familiar with this, it's an accelerated learning environment. It's an accelerated opportunity environment. That's where the solutions are going to come, because you're in and around people that are going to support you. Because on the flip side, if you're really nervous and you're walking on eggshells, you're afraid to speak your mind, people are going to shoot you down. The last thing you want, you're too afraid, and like you said, you're kind of frozen. So you're not going to be trying anything, because it's not a big deal to fail in the direction you want to go, especially when you have a ton of support. So I'm wondering if you could dive a little deeper on, a little guide to someone listening to I like the idea of like being your own best friend, and like, if you had like the most supportive inner dialogue. And I remember Wayne Dyer in one of his talks, he was playing tennis with one of his buddies, and his buddy missed a shot, and he said something. He's like, "Oh, you idiot!" And Wayne says, "Hey, you don't talk to my friend like that." And his friend was taken back by it. It's such a ridiculous thing, but I always remember that example because that's kind of how I'm programmed to talk to myself, and I'm always looking for ways to improve that inner dialogue.
Yeah. So I often say there's no more important relationship than the one between your adult who lives in the heart center, the conscious mind. So the adult and the child who lives in the subconscious mind. So that relationship with self is super important. But let's be more practical and immediate, give a way for people to evaluate where they happen to be today. I've already alluded to the fact that most people are not that connected to self. So I will say one word for all the listeners. And what I'd like you to do is put all your focus on that word, but don't change a single thing about what you're already doing. The word is breath. Don't change, just notice. Almost everyone I've ever taught has discovered that they breathe rather shallowly down into the upper chest. Some people breathe sort of toward the middle of the chest, above the solar plexus or the diaphragm that divides the upper and lower body. I call this survival breathing, just enough to survive. And so there are reasons why we do this survival breath. But what we don't understand is that every single breath we take is a clear message to the nervous system, to who we are. The in-breath says, this is how much I trust I deserve. This is how much I trust I'm safe to receive. The out-breath is, this is how safe I feel to share who I am on the inside. Most people will tell me I don't really know who I am on the inside. I just know that I'm going through the motions and fulfilling structures. And that's important too. So the breath that I suggest that people take starts out like a baby lying on its back in a crib, and the only thing that actually moves is the lower belly. If you see a baby lying there, the belly goes up and down. You have a little 2-year-old, you will see the more natural breathing when they're lying there asleep.
Also,
So
perfect
this is
squats. Sorry to cut you off, but you ever notice it? You ever see a baby squat? It is the most perfect squat of all time. So sorry, I got to
balanced,
say it.
easy, boom,
Okay,
all the way
yeah,
down.
yeah. Ass to
It's
grass. I
true.
just been doing a lot of squats at the gym, and I'm like, I just want to put a little barbell on her back, and just like she's gonna be amazing.
We naturally do healthy things in many different ways when we're tiny. It's before we have all those experiences and we don't receive the nurturing encouragement about how to connect to self and trust self and whatever. So we end up accumulating all those experiences, fear and shame. We don't want to shake that up. Just like I've said a couple of times, that was the last place I wanted to look. I don't want to get in touch with my inner self. I'll shake up all that stuff. Well, as the adult, getting in touch with myself gives me access to nurture it. If I stay up in my head disconnected, then I don't even have the chance to nurture it. So I can even go to 1,000 seminars and hear amazing information and even understand the concepts to a lot of it, and I'm still not connected to myself, and I still can't transform myself because I'm not in my body. So the breath that I suggest, and I'll describe it in case people are not looking at the visual, that they're only listening, breathing into the lower belly, filling it up so that you look like you're about 6 months pregnant. This is like going to the gym where you'll lift a whole ton of weight, but you don't walk around in life lifting all that weight. That's your exercise time. This is your breathing exercise time. So we breathe and fill that lower belly so that we are as full as we can get all the way down to the pelvic bone. And then the out breath, out the mouth, is a full out breath. How many people have ever even taken a breath like that or made all that sound with the air? Well, you'd look ridiculous 3 centuries ago, or it's a bad metaphor to stick with the gym and lifting weights because they probably did some version of that centuries ago. But the point is, you go to the gym and you're willing to do all these things that might look ridiculous to someone, but if it's helping you physically, hallelujah, you're willing to do it. Well, this will help you energetically, which feeds every other part of the body. Every other, your mental, your emotional, all of it will have so much more vitality. Proactive health. As an example, I've been sick 2 days in 25 years. And that's because of moving this energy and nurturing myself. It sustains proactive health. So breathe with me. We don't want to just talk about it. We want to create an actual experience now that I've gotten you to pay attention to what is likely survival breathing. Put your hands on your lower belly, and we're going to do 2 breaths together. Breathing in, safe to receive, out through the mouth. And then calm, quiet, nurturing. If you need to take a little breath in between while I'm doing that, no problem. Now breathe in again fully. Out the mouth. You want that out breath to sound like an ah. Most people keep their lips about as tiny as it can get, just like a straw, so the air can get out. That's not the breath that I'm demonstrating. If you can see the visual, great. If you can't, pay attention to it sounds like an ah. Versus doesn't sound like ah at all. We want everything to get open and nurtured and in flow. And when we do this as a practical way, we are releasing pressure, anxiety. We're encouraging movement of energy and health. We are going to be more awake, much more energized, much more connected to self as a starting place. Do that 1 minute, 2 or 3 times a day. You can do it when you're driving to work. You can do it when you first wake up. If you feel self-conscious, do it in moments where you're private, no problem. I guarantee you, just that one exercise will begin to make a difference before you go into some stressful situation. Breathe, get calm, get your body engaged and relaxed. This is just me having another moment. It's me having another experience. And the one that I choose to create for myself is connected, calm, and present. That is a lot of layers, believe it or not, of adult alternative to the conditioned, habitual, wounded child. So there's an exercise.
Yeah, I love that, and I'll agree with you. It's incredibly powerful when I feel like it's when you wake up in the morning, you've got this repetitive process. Put on your clothes, you have the coffee, run out the door, you do work, and you're kind of like getting hijacked the whole day with your mind just constantly on autopilot with never a chance to think. So someone who's in that will be like, well, I don't have a chance to breathe. What's the even point of that? But what that does is it puts you back into your body, into direct experience, into the moment, and it settles everything down. So it pauses this programming. You can imagine like being in a VR and you got auditory, visual, all this stimulus going on. And so you're just pushing pause, and you're reconnecting with your heart and with your spirit, and you're just stopping for a moment. So now, like, spirit can communicate with you. You can get into your natural state of being. Now, there's an example my friend Mark England shares in some of his training, where he shows this grizzly bear fight. And these grizzly bears, they fight, and they have this fight or flight kind of scenario going on. And then when the fight is done, this bear does this crazy shake, like, and then it goes back into its natural resting state. So us as human beings, we're in this constant kind of stress state, this survival state, and we're not even aware of it. And when you talked about the breathing, that's one of those, unseen benefits that I received through martial arts. And what I was telling you before we went on air is, like, I was kind of like aware of stuff. And I think martial arts taught me so many different things, where someone will be experiencing something and I'm like, what do you mean? How are you not breathing in your belly? It doesn't make any sense. But because I was taught at a young age, I got these benefits, and I didn't realize these challenges that come from not knowing and understanding that. And when I wrote Zen Athlete, I was looking at bringing it into schools, and I was like, well, if I'm trying to teach this to a grade 1 or 4-year-old kid, or grade 4, what's the basics I want to teach them, and how do I explain that to a teacher? And what I broke it down to was, if you're going to make a basketball shot, the first thing is to clear your mind. So take 3 deep breaths in before you shoot the shot, or 2 deep breaths. An individual who can stop and clear their mind and come to that state of equilibrium, like you just shared, that's a fundamental difference in consciousness, in spirit, and quality of life for a person who can and can't do that. And it's just a matter of choice. The second thing is visualize the shot going in. So now you influence your reality. Again, it's a fundamental shift in the way that you navigate your life. And then the third one, being, if you miss the shot, what's the most powerful and positive perspective that you can have? So it's how you respond, and then repeat the cycle. And if you can do that holistically from a state of balance, self-worth, inner self-worth, no matter if you miss 10 shots in a row or whatever the case is, you love and appreciate yourself as you're kind of diving into here, having that self-nurturing. You don't need someone else. If you embarrass yourself, you can pick your pieces up. If you fail at your business, you can pick your pieces up. It's nice to have a group of people that will do that for you, and that's going to be easier, but you have to be able to do it for yourself. That's the most important thing, and I feel like that's what you're addressing here. And so it's a simple practice, and I definitely invite people to try it out. And if you're doing something like that, you could also add that in for, if you do a quick assessment right now of the emotion you experience most of the time you don't like. So it might be you're a little bit anxious, or you get angry a little bit too quick, or you're a little bit depressed, right? Whenever you feel that emotion come up, try this breath pattern, because you'll notice, if you're able to do that for 1 week, that challenging experience of anxiety, depression, or anger is going to diminish. You're going to stay there less. And it's so simple and so practical, and it will change how you think, and it'll change your neurology, and it'll change your possibility, because now you're opening up now, right? You're not in that fear state. And if you get in the fear state, there's no possibility, there's no expanded thinking, there's no spirit connecting with you. And so, yeah, just a very excellent and simple process. I wanted to ask you, there's a part in your, unless you want to comment on my little rant
No, no,
here.
no. There's always stuff to say. So go,
Okay.
head wherever you want.
Okay. Well, I like, in your book, it talks about what makes a man great. And you had this, question for yourself. And I've talked about on previous podcasts what I believe an awakened man is, or an enlightened person, right? When I was younger, I want to be enlightened. I want to wake up, and I want to be fully, self-aware, self-alert, whatever. And I thought enlightened was like a Buddha mind, I'm manifesting. Who knows what I even thought it was. Right now in my adult brain, I would just be like peaceful and centered no matter what. I could wake up full of self-love, self-worth, accept all the mistakes I've had. I'm not putting my brain there. I'm just in a state of peace and surrender and joy and calm and alertness, and all these, wonderful states of being and flow. And so if I could maintain that quality of consciousness and state of being throughout the day, that to me would be powerful. So I'd be curious, what you came up with when you were talking about what makes a man great.
Well, as I said, my map of self is child, adult, and soul. I've divided my book into child, adult, and soul. And when I wrote the chapter, What Makes a Man Great, I was around 8, 9, 10 years old in the book. And so I was trying to figure out, because I had no male models in my life, no one who shared, taught, guided. And so I looked and I was trying to figure out what would make me live up to what is lovable, me trying to fit in, me trying to be a part of the tribe. And so it could easily say what makes a great person, whether it's a man or a woman, but I was trying to figure it out because of being male. And as I said, I tried to do it through achievement, through money, through glamour, through getting validation, so many things in the bright lights part of the title. And ultimately, once I began to recognize as an adult that I get to choose who I'm going to be, I get to choose the qualities. I want to be compassionate, so I'm going to purposefully practice compassion. I want to be courageous, so I'm going to purposefully practice courage. And I share examples and stories, of course, throughout the book of how I had a chance to practice this, even on major world stages. Yeah, I would be so easy to go into stories, but the bottom line was I also recognized that I had natural qualities as a child that no one knew how to acknowledge and get me to recognize, but I could look back and see that I always had this beautiful innocence and a desire to be connected. And I wanted to value other people. I cared about other people. I had a lot of qualities that I didn't know how to claim and recognize, just like I didn't know how to recognize my father and all of his challenges. And so it's such a great thing to eventually say what makes a man great is being true to self, being the most authentic version of self that we can be, practicing the specific qualities that make us proud to be me. I eventually came up with one guiding principle out of all the lessons and things that I was learning, and that is, what choices can I make now that are going to leave me feeling the best about myself? Because self-love is the grand prize that we all seek, because then everything is enhanced and we can bring more of self into every situation. So to me, the answer became more and more being as fully true to myself as I can, making the choices that make me proud of me, and practicing the qualities that matter to me. It's not going to be the same qualities to every person. There's not a particular end result that we're all going for. But if we learn to get in touch with what truly matters to self, and then you spend each day investing in self, and then investing yourself into the jobs and relationships and situations, then all of a sudden life becomes fulfilling in such a different way. We care about it. We want to wake up every day. We want to go play tennis because we love playing tennis. We want to go and invest in these friendships because they matter to us so much, etc. And so all of it comes out of learning how to love and value, which starts with self. And that creates a man or a woman that we can be proud of and feel excited to be alive, excited to share, excited to engage. When we don't have that, like I certainly didn't for so long in my early life, we're afraid to engage. We're afraid to be known. We're afraid to share ourselves. We have so much early decision from the child experiences that say, there's no way anyone could love this. There's no way this is going to be okay. And so we hide, we mask, we pretend, we compensate. And those are all antithetical to I love who I am. I love what I'm choosing. I love engaging in these specific things at this stage. It might shift in the next stage. And so that's a little bit of my journey with deep confusion about what makes a man great or a person great into some of the celebration of being the man that I am today and will continue to enhance and deepen, but not because I'm not already lovable. I love being able to take people as adults to look back at their child and to actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to do another quick exercise and your listeners can have this seed planted now. So, if you will, what I'd love you to do is just imagine that there are 10 little innocent 3-year-olds around you. You've never met any of them. Just imagine any combo of boys, girls, shapes, sizes, cultures, religions, it doesn't matter. 10 little 3-year-olds. Now get in touch with the adult that you are today. And do you think that you could pick out one of these little innocent 3-year-olds who does not deserve to be loved, nurtured, and guided in their lifetime? Almost, maybe all of the adults that I have asked this question have said, no, of course they all deserve to be loved, nurtured, and guided. And I say, that's adult reality. Now there are 11 little 3-year-olds in this circle, and you've never met this new one either, but it's you as a 3-year-old. Do you think you could magically look at this child for the first time and go, oh, that's clearly the one who doesn't deserve to be loved, nurtured, and guided? And it's like, oh, no, I couldn't. And I go, okay, now one of these little kids, doesn't matter which one, falls down, scrapes their elbow, they're confused, they're hurt, they don't know what's happened, and now a little teeny bit of red stuff is even coming to the surface, and they don't know what it is, and they're confused, hurt, scared, and then they see you, the adult that you are right now. If that child came running over to you, would you put up your hands and go, get the hell away from me, I don't want to deal with that crap? No. And that is because there's an adult nurturer who can respond to the innocence of a wounded child that lives right here in the heart space. And if you've just now recognized that your own inner child deserves to be loved, nurtured, and guided, you can say from a place of truth, you matter. And I can learn how, as the adult version of us, to show up and nurture you and provide so many things that mommy and daddy just didn't know. And that was the soul setup for the lifetime, but it didn't make it the truth. It made it your experience based on the limits of what people knew. And now you recognize a deeper truth. You, little one inside me, deserve to be loved, nurtured, and guided. And when we start from this place, it changes everything. And then we get on with learning what it means and learning how and having learning curves and getting better and better and better at all 9 levels of nurturing. So there's a little bit more.
I love that. I love that example. It's such a powerful tool. I learned something similar in neuro linguistic programming that would,
Yep.
take people back to when they had this childhood trauma or experience, and then see it as the adult, and then talk to yourself as a kid, then talk to your parent, and then do a
Mm-hmm.
little inquiry. And it always ends up with more compassion for the person who's harming you. You know what I mean? And more understanding for the little one. And then the little one and you as the adult version have this conversation. And it's so amazing to see what comes up. And it's so powerful for people to experience. It's amazing what can happen in one little short experience. And people could write down, okay, if you go to your childhood traumas, like write them all out and kind of work through using that process or something similar. So it's
Mhm.
really profound. I would be curious your thoughts on um, people just forgiving themselves. I feel like so many people, they have this repeat when they're trying to improve their lives, that they're kind of have this repeat of all the negative stuff they've done, right there, rather than
Mhm.
thinking about all the wonderful things they've done. They wake up and they just
Mhm.
remember, oh, I wasn't perfect here, I wasn't perfect there, and they have this negative repeat. How do you help someone either overcome a trauma or help that, it's like they have a highlight reel of the worst stuff, right? And that's what kind of pops up on a daily basis. So how would you recommend somebody navigate that kind of situation?
Well, again, there are many layers, but we can do an introductory layer that will make sense to everyone, I would imagine. And that is asking another adult reality question. Do I know anyone who doesn't make mistakes? Well, just think of three people that you truly value in your life. Have those people ever made mistakes? Of course they have. Did anybody pop out of the womb knowing it all, knowing how to do everything, how to do every skill at the highest level? Of course not. We don't take the time to ask the adult reality questions because we have become conditioned as the wounded child who simply personalized and made decisions at the wise old ages of 5, 6, and 7 about who we are. And then we just spend the rest of our lives justifying it. See, there's another example of why I suck. And it's like, what? You just are in a learning curve. And if you beat yourself up and knock yourself down every time, you won't learn. You're just telling your child this is all he can or she can expect. And we are the ones who hold the whole thing in place. The great news is that means we're also the one in a position of power to begin to introduce adult truths that shall set you free. So, okay, next time I make a mistake, I might initially go to beat myself up, but go, whoa, nope. Let me just remind you, little one, everybody makes mistakes. That's how we learn. So, what did we learn? What can we adjust? What can we nurture? There's so many layers you can begin to add to this simple beginning. And to forgive ourselves for having a learning curve, excuse me, it almost seems absurd that it even needs to be a statement. Once we've asked ourselves the simple question about having learning curves and making mistakes as a vital part of developing and deepening and getting better and better, so why would I need to forgive myself for being human and having mistakes and a learning curve? Well, we do. So let's make it just as simple. Okay, I can begin to accept that. That's a beginning of forgiveness. I can begin to acknowledge. I can begin to hold a space for that. I can begin to see that no ships are sinking in the harbor because I'm not beating myself up. Oh, wow. I could even choose to celebrate what we learned. I could even choose to nurture and go, isn't it great to practice this self acceptance, this self acknowledgement? I'm starting to name it as self rather than just the 9 nurturing needs to be acknowledged and accepted. Now it's self acknowledgement and self acceptance. And when we can begin to do that, we naturally want to forgive whatever we had initially learned by judging and shaming. So it's more like I need to forgive myself for judging and shaming. Because before we learn to do that, we tend to judge ourselves for judging ourselves and shaming ourselves for shaming ourselves. Well, that's helpful. But it's the learning curve of how do I treat myself? And it's so amazing when people start to do this more adult, nurturing approach, how 100% of the people that practice the tools make distinct moves into more and more of their authentic self and appreciate, love, enjoy, whatever you want to call it, their lives more fully than they did before. It's a beautiful thing to watch that consistent, reliable transformation. So there's an answer.
Beautiful. I love that. And I wanted to, share too, a few questions ago when you talked about the question, what choices can I make now to leave me feeling better about myself? Is so powerful and so profound. And when we ask ourselves these deep questions, I feel like that's where somebody who knows what they're talking about will come up with a good answer. It's simple, right? It's a good quality question. I think there's a quote
Mm-hmm.
that will say something along the lines is the smarter that we get, the better questions we ask, something along those lines.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I feel like it's so simple and so profound because it's true, right? That's all you really can do. It's an action step that will create these different feelings. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I wanted to ask, with all the
1 second
challenges.
before we jump,
Yeah.
I apologize. Let
Oh
me
no, it's
jump
okay.
in
Go
on
ahead.
that one because
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
important.
Sure.
Do you begin to see why I say I'm not dividing child and adult into the years of childhood and the years of adulthood? No. The child is the frozen initial experiences and decisions. And then the adult is capable of a much deeper evaluation and consciousness and set of choices. And so eventually you can say, was that my child habitual? Or was that my adult who can set me up better and better and better? And so the child and the adult continue to live in the same body, even when we're 20, 30, 50, 90. And so we want the adult to become that much more. And we haven't even touched on soul. So there's so much in this book that maps the journey of transformation that is so profound. So back to your question.
Oh shoot! Well, we haven't even touched on. So I had one. I had a few questions I wanted
Please
to
go
ask,
with the
but
question. Yeah.
um,
No,
so
I think it's
man,
great. It'll give
yeah,
people something to look forward to in the book in a big way. Plus, this is just one challenge of many different things that I cover in the book with lots of stories and that demonstrate it all.
I
Please.
love it. Well, it's like an hour and a half teaser, so that's amazing. It's
Ah,
obviously a deep book. So I want to
yeah.
ask a question. So many people that I know over the last 2 years, depending on their situation, especially in Canada, around the States, other places, have been dealing with profound challenge, fear, scarcity, unknown, transition, a lot of new revelations about what's going on. And I've heard a lot of different perspectives from people on how to navigate these times. And I'd just be curious your suggestion for that, because a lot of people are in big transition, they're in big challenge, they're in big faith mode, and they might not be familiar with that. I've told my partner from the beginning, I will go Amish or Mennonite or live in a tent before I comply to anything that goes against my integrity. I do not give a crap. You know what I mean? I trust implicitly in God, the creator, and the great spirit, or however you want to see that I will be guided. I also have almost died a bunch of times, so I know that my life will end when it's supposed to end. I'm not worried about that. I am a tad worried about prolonged suffering. I'll be honest about that. I don't want that. And I'm, the biggest fear is for my daughter to have a good life. So I'll do anything to provide that within the realms of, my integrity. So that's kind of like a long story just to say, for people who, I don't think it's going to get to that level of gnarliness, because the people that I've seen respond where they had a situation that was no longer in their integrity, they made a decision to change it. Now they've dropped a lot of different things, but they've expanded all these new experiences that are even more aligned, and they couldn't see them or experience them while holding onto that old anchor that was no longer serving them. So I'd just be curious your 2 cents on that, because I feel like a lot of people have made really big decisions, and I feel like it's kind of like with the health thing. A lot of the people that have come on the show, they had their life one way, then they had a big catalyst, right? Sometimes it was a health scare because they weren't taking care of their body. They were super stressed and overachieving, and caused something that said, you know what, I got to reevaluate what's most important to me because now my house shot. And then now they navigate life differently. And so I'd just be curious your 2 cents on, the challenges we see in the world and how to navigate those.
2 cents.
Yeah, yeah.
I probably got it closer to 92 cents, but um, goodness, there's so many things. But again, let's just do an introduction that makes sense as a foundation, and then people can go further. And for instance, I talk a great deal in the third section of the book about what's happening on the planet, how it's in divine order, how the soul operates, how the planet is being encouraged in a state of evolution that is unlike anything we've known. We've shifted more in 30 years than we did in the last 3,000 years. It's moving in a big way. And so, one of the things that is super important for people to consider is that no matter what you choose, you're learning. No matter what you choose, your soul is being informed about what works well, what works less well. Sometimes I need to bang my head on that tree in order to recognize this way of overcompensating just does not work. Just like I needed to go and do 60 leading roles before, in awesome scenarios, before I realized that's not going to do it for me on the inside. And so, there's so many directions my head wants to go. But the bottom line is, all the things that are happening, let's look at just the pandemic of the last 2 years. This was the first time we've had the technology to become aware that the whole planet's going through the same thing at the same time, and we're aware of a ton of what's going on in lots of different countries and cultures and whatever at the same time. All put on an even playing field to some degree, to a greater degree than ever. And it doesn't matter how wealthy somebody is or how high up in a certain hierarchy of position. We were all put on a human playing field negotiating this, and it was an interrupt of the familiar. So let's put it in the terms of the child, adult, and soul. If the soul says, the children are caught up in all their compensations and they want their hits of gratification, and they're caught up in the me compensation of trying to figure out how to at least get some hit of gratification because I don't trust that my needs, I don't even know what my needs are, much less that they can be fulfilled. And so it's an interrupt of a certain level of consciousness, an interrupt of a lot of habitual patterns. And it was like we were all sent to our room and said, you got some time to think about it now. What's important to you? What was working well? What wasn't? Well, at first, most people were just fighting change and interruption and whatever. And I believe that those changes have only begun in this important acceleration. Because in order to make healthier choices, like you said, they realized a whole lot of things that they didn't realize in the habitual. In order for us to truly move into wiser choices, like some people needed the health scare, we're getting planetary interruptions, and we're getting our systems that we thought we could count on, just like a child counting on mommy, daddy. We need to learn to land in ourselves, seek deeper solutions, learn to nurture and value self, and then I can nurture and value others. Well, sometimes I'm not on that path and I'm not choosing that path. So, oh, wait a minute. My habitual is interrupted in such a big way that I actually need other people. I need help. I need things that, and I would never have considered asking or showing up or exploring or looking for new solutions because I was so wrapped up in my habitual choices. And so I like to say the dance we have with life and one another is that life reveals me to me. It shows me what my commitments have been. It shows me where I'm in fear. It shows me where I'm in celebration. It shows me the next steps of possibility and gives me constant chances to practice whatever that is. And so I believe on a soul level that we have entered this acceleration that says, let us, the higher beings, the God consciousness, let us reveal you to you in a more immediate way. Please respond. Please see that there are alternatives and that there are more people and teachers and approaches and access to information about self, access to so many more solutions. Practice them. Interrupt. Practice. Try things. Show up and learn how with each other. Everybody's the same. Everybody has learning curves. Everybody has to face the challenges. Some of them are individual, some of them are collective, and we have a lot more collective ones revealing themselves. And so, if you believe in a soul journey, then this is a stunning stage of evolution, but it is not the only lifetime by any stretch. And so I'm going to take my next perfect steps in this lifetime at whatever level I'm in. It's like we're all in school together, and some people are in first grade, some in fifth, some in 10th. Everybody's studying different subjects. Everybody's facing different challenges, but we're all here together learning, and we can encourage and inspire. And the more I learn, the more I can share that with you. And the more you learn, the more you can share that with me. And we can become much more focused on what serves the good of the whole, because I've learned to value myself as a starting place, and I don't need to play out the compensations and stay separate and defended and pretended and masked. Instead, I can become more authentic and connected with you and create experiences that are so meaningful. And so the wake-up calls are crucial. They're a part of the divine order. And so if we don't have the whole context, then we're just pissed off at the symptoms. But it doesn't help. And so learning how to come back to center and have a clear approach that allows us to embrace it. I didn't say like it. That allows us to embrace it as a necessary process of evolving into learn how to love and value. That is the ultimate goal of the soul. Integration of self in love and value. So there's some thoughts.
Very well said. I really enjoy and think that those perspectives are powerful and very accurate as well. This is a challenging time, but we can always look to how we respond, right, and what's being asked of us. So this is a a very challenging realm to be in at times. And when I interviewed Tom Campbell, who's one of the you know major physicists on simulation theory, he kept talking about how we need to go from children to adults in everything that we do, and we're being asked to do that, right? And even
Mm,
with some of the bigger picture stuff, when I did the law summit, they just talked about the government kind of being like your parents that need to take care of everything for you. But when you're more self-sustainable, you have a direct connection with God, creator, how you live, and you take radical responsibility, you don't need to be micromanaged. And so a lot of us have kind of given that over, right? All of this, um,
Yeah.
a lot of our lives and a lot of our thinking and a lot of our brains. I remember in school, right, is this kind of teaching you, you don't question anything, you sit in class, you do as you're told, and you're not taught anything that you're sharing now that you had to learn as an adult. Imagine they
Yeah.
shared, like, that was the goal for me was an athlete, was get this to kids, because if they knew, it was hiding this stuff through sports,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
kids want to get better at sports. So if they taught what you're teaching now to kids, what kind of powerful kids will we have to teach them self-worth and self-responsibility and
Yeah.
all of these beautiful things by healing those wounds? It's that quote that says, hurt people, right? And even
Mm.
your father's story was so amazing. I kind of giggled when he's like, how did you not know that you were not very good? It just shatters the brain that he didn't know that. And so it's
He was
unbelievable.
providing money and blah 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 for at least the first 13 years. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, no
Yeah.
clue.
Unbelievable. So, this has been enjoyable. I want to ask you a lot more questions, but I can ask you one more specifically, and then I'll let you go and you can kind of share your closing thoughts. But I'd be curious your thoughts on who is God to you, and how do we connect to that thing? Because the Native Americans I studied, they call it the Great Spirit, right? In Law Summit, some of them said, God isn't the greatest word. You want to use creator. The Native Americans would talk about creator, a creator, great spirit. And so there's a lot, and then you've got the books like the Bible, and you've got the Bhagavad Gita, you got the Buddha, you got all these different things kind of moving in the same direction, right? When I went to the Parliament of World Religions, over 220 religions represented to, you know, find creator, find God, find meaning in that inner connection, and all these teachings, it talks about God being within. And so I have my own 2 cents, but I'd be curious yours. I feel like if we can find that honest connection with the creator, God, source, or spirit, that's going to be enough to guide us to the things that we need to know, to how we navigate this existence, and be guided on our soul path or our life experience.
Oh lordy, there's so many things that I want to say.
Just a light, easy question for the for the
Yeah,
closing.
I mean, truly, it matters so much, the answer to this question. And again, I would like about a week to answer it. So let's start out with every facet of self is sacred. Every. Your wound is sacred. Your learning curves are sacred. Your gifts are sacred. Your greatness is sacred. People tend to be quite afraid of their greatness and their wounds and put themselves in a tiny little comfort zone in the middle. Whatever was acceptable within mommy daddy's comfort zones is the simplest way to say it. And so no one has ever really said sacred. Can you imagine if, just like you discovered in the exercise with the 3-year-olds in the circle, that from the time we were little, someone had said, you are a sacred individual on a unique soul journey, and you matter, and you deserve love, nurturing, and guidance. You are on a soul journey that's perfect, just like every grade in school is perfect for introducing next layers, next options, next opportunities to inspire and encourage next depths of skills and possibilities and whatever. And just like when you were a 6-year-old, if I had said to you, there's an adult held inside you, you'd have been so confused. What does that even mean? I can't even relate to what that might, the experience of that might be like. And I now say and yet you're in an adult body, and it was the same body you had when you were 6. You just grew into awakening more of self. And now I say to you as an adult, there's a soul inside you. And the adult goes, I don't know what that actually means. What's the practicality? What is it? And there's just as big a quantum shift into soul as there was from child to adult, particularly if it's an empowered, conscious adult. And so the soul is awakening on the planet for mass consciousness. And that's why in 30 years we've expanded and evolved and awakened in so many realms, more than in 3,000 years. The soul is awakening, and the divine order of God consciousness is inspiring the revelation of what's working and what's not working, encouraging us to seek deeper connection, deeper solutions, deeper interdependence, mutual value. And so, what is God? It is all of it. It's the consciousness of all of it. So let's just say, what is Matt? Well, were you Matt fully when you were 3? When you were in 3rd grade? When you were in 30th grade? What more and more and more of Matt has been revealing itself, and you find out that you are more and more and more, however far you choose to expand. God consciousness is the inclusive sacredness of all of it, all that is. And every stage is sacred. Every stage is meaningful. But no one's ever taught us to look inside and connect to self and trust sacred anything, much less sacred self. So that's how the answer to a foundation of God and what is it wants to come out this time.
Beautiful. Very well said. I love that answer. Man, this has been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you all day. We didn't even get into the soul part of your book, which is brutal.
No,
So I
I
have to get
know
you
it's
back. And I know the book is launched April 12th. Is that what it said?
April 12th. Yep.
Okay, excellent. So we're on YouTube now. So people can go to your website. If so, what I want to ask you is there anything that you wish that I had asked you or that you want to cover before we close it out?
No, I really think that we have exchanged so many beautiful thoughts and foundations in lots of different directions, and one piece of this conversation will touch a certain number of people and others will touch other people, and I love that. I trust that you and I are guided. We're all guided, and this is what needed to come out for now. I just would encourage people that it's challenging to trust the habitual, yeah, but that doesn't really apply to me. Yeah, but I've practiced negating myself for so long. I've tried everything. I failed. I don't even, please, the only failure truly, and you learn from that as well, is not showing up for you. The whole dang point of all of this is so that you will keep seeking. You found yourself to this conversation for a reason. What will you do with it? So you can reach out to scenarios that you already feel compelled and intrigued by. You can reach out in my direction at ronbaker.net. You can get the book and find out a much more complete map of the evolution of self, claiming the whole self. You can reach out to Matt. Reach out. Keep seeking. Showing up for you is like me eventually realizing with my dad, I've got to show up. Life can't just magically transition me from Woundedville to integrated, fulfilled. I've got to show up. And believe me, when I say to my clients, I know it sounds too good to be true, I'm a living example, and so are tons of others who've been approaching life this way. true fulfillment at deeper and deeper and deeper levels. I like to say creating lives that get better and better and better, dot, 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 is entirely possible, but you have to show up for you.
Beautiful. I love it. Very well said. Well, thank you so much for your time. You dropped the website was ronbaker.net.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Book goes live April 12th. Yeah, you obviously have a deep skill set and level of knowledge. And I like how it's practical. My favorite thing with all of this stuff is just practical guide to spirituality. You have to be able to have your own guide and your own map for your own understanding. And I really like what you close with as well. It's just that willingness to show up and go to that next step for yourself, whatever that is, because there are options out there, and it's just that intent and actually taking action. So this has been beautiful, man. I'll talk to you all day, but we'll stay in touch. I appreciate you coming on the show, and just thanks for coming here.
Thank you so much, Matt.
My pleasure. Thanks guys for watching. See you in the next one.